Have you ever noticed that sliver of stillness right before your eyes flutter open in the morning? That fraction of a second where you aren't burdened by your name, your history, your failures. You're just pure awareness, floating in nothing. And then, like a thunderclap, the weight of your life crashes down on you. The overdue bills, the strained relationship, the career that feels like a slow surrender. You remember exactly who you're supposed to be, and it hurts. But what if I told you that first sliver of nothing, that's the only thing that's actually real? The ancient philosophers of the Stoa discovered a truth that neuroscientists are only beginning to map. That brief, silent awareness before the mental noise starts, that's your authentic self. Everything after that? It's just a narrative you've been rehearsing for so long, you've forgotten you're the author. Zeno, the merchant who would go on to found this entire school of thought, learned this lesson the hard way. After a shipwreck stole his fortune and left him with nothing but the clothes on his back. He didn't crumble. He walked into a bookstore in Athens, listened to a philosopher speak, and reportedly declared, "Now that I've lost everything, I see I'm on the path to a prosperous voyage." He wasn't being clever. He was admitting that the life he'd been desperately trying to salvage, the identity he'd built on sand, was already doomed. He was just too busy bailing water to notice the ship was sinking. So let me ask you a question that might sting. What sinking ship are you still bailing out? Look at your life. Not the version you post online. Not the version you tell your colleagues at the water cooler. Look at the 2 a.m. version. The one where the silence is so loud, it hurts. The one where you've become so accustomed to disappointment, it feels like a comfortable old coat. The one where your internal prayer has become a desperate plea for a better tomorrow. You might think you're depressed, but what if you're not sick? You're just finally done pretending, and that's not a breakdown, that's a breakthrough. There's a version of you buried deep inside, not the one who gave up, but the one who persisted, the one who, when faced with fear, chose courage so many times that it became their instinct. That version isn't some future self you have to wait for. They're trapped right now, suffocating under a mountain of I can'ts and I am not readies. That tightness in your chest, that constant restlessness you feel, that's not anxiety. That's your future self clawing at the walls of your excuses, screaming to be let out. Over the next minutes, we're going to hand you the key. This isn't a lecture. This is a field manual for people who are tired of being spectators in their own existence. You're going to stop researching how to change and start the messy, glorious process of becoming. But you have to make a choice right now. Engage. Hit that like button, type "I'm stepping into the arena" in the comments, and mean it. Subscribe to Stoic Mindset Mastery, because we don't deal in fantasies here. We deal in the raw, unpolished truth for people who've forgotten they were born for the fight. And don't you dare skip ahead. Every second of this is medicine. The ancient texts weren't written for comfortable academics. They were battle-tested strategies for people bleeding out on the battlefield of life, people terrified, people who had to summon strength they didn't know existed. You're on that battlefield right now. Stop fighting alone. Let's begin. First, we have to dismantle a lie you've been sold. You aren't depressed, you're domesticated. Think about it. A wolf in the wild doesn't suffer from existential dread. It doesn't lie awake wondering if it's a good enough provider. It doesn't compare its hunting skills to the eagle or its speed to the deer. It just is. It hunts, rests, plays, and protects, fully aligned with its nature. Now, what happens when you put that same wolf in a cage at the zoo? You see it pace, back and forth, the same worn path for hours. It sways its head. It loses its spirit. That's not a different animal. It's the same animal in an unnatural environment, responding perfectly normally to a condition that contradicts its core design. You are that pacing wolf. You wake to a jarring alarm, ignoring your body's natural rhythm. You force-feed yourself lunch at a predetermined time, whether you're hungry or not. You sit in a box for 8 hours, even though your brain craves movement and novelty every 90 minutes. You suppress your instincts, quiet your intuition, and then wonder why you feel so inexplicably off. You're not lazy, you're not broken. You're a wild creature trying to survive in a concrete box, and it's slowly killing your spirit. You aren't depressed. You're a wild thing suffocating in a cage. Diogenes, the philosopher they called a madman, lived in a barrel and owned a single bowl, which he eventually threw away. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, stood over him and offered him anything he desired, Diogenes simply said, "Stand out of my light." He refused to be tamed. He refused to trade his inner freedom for external comfort. You don't need to live in a barrel, but you must ask yourself, which parts of your life are you living because they are authentically yours? And which parts are you performing because you've been conditioned to? That job you hate. Who taught you that security is more valuable than vitality? That relationship you're staying in? Who said your obligation to them outweighs your obligation to your own soul? Here's a small act of rebellion. Tomorrow, do one impractical thing just because it makes you feel alive. Sing loudly while making breakfast, even if you're terrible. Take a different route to work just to see a new tree. Laugh at something that isn't even funny. Notice that tiny spark, that feeling of, this is silly, but I like it. That's your wild self, still alive under all the training, still waiting for a chance to breathe. This is also why you're lonely. You can't form a genuine connection while you're performing a character. You're introducing people to a polished resume, not a real person. And resumes don't have friends, they have contacts. Start reclaiming your territory. Eat when you're hungry, move when you're restless. Be quiet when you need silence. Type it below if you're ready. I choose freedom over approval. Next, we need to talk about the addiction no one names. You are addicted to your suffering, not because you enjoy pain, but because it has become the most reliable thing in your life. It's your identity, your excuse, your twisted security blanket. And the terrifying part, you don't even realize you're the one reaching for it. There's a story of the Stoic Chrysippus. When he too lost everything in a shipwreck, he simply remarked, "My possessions have given me the perfect opportunity to practice philosophy with fewer distractions. No denial, no toxic optimism. Just a man who refused to let external events write the story of his inner state. But you've built a shrine to your pain. You visit it daily. Listen to how you define yourself. I'm an anxious person. I'm bad with money. I've always been depressed." These aren't observations. They're proclamations. They're identities you protect, because if you're not the person who struggles, who the hell are you? Your pain has become useful. It explains your lack of success. It justifies your inaction. It protects you from the terror of trying and failing. It gives you a tribe to belong to, a language to speak, and a part of you knows that if you let it go, you'd have to face the terrifying possibility that you're not limited, you're just scared. How much time do you spend rehearsing your wounds, replaying old conversations, scrolling through photos of better times, telling the story of your heartbreak, researching your symptoms, reading about others who feel the same? You're not looking for a solution. You're looking for confirmation. You're feeding the monster. Every time you identify with your pain instead of observing it, you're choosing the familiar hell over the unfamiliar possibility of peace. This is the loop. You feel bad, so you consume content about feeling bad, which makes you feel worse, which validates your original feeling, which makes you consume more. You aren't seeking help. You're seeking company. Your pain is real, but it's not your master unless you keep bowing to it. What if your pain isn't your personality? What if it's just an experience like weather that passes through? Try this for one day. Go 24 hours without mentioning your struggles. Not to anyone, not even to yourself in your own head. Notice how often you want to. Notice the strange emptiness where your identity used to be. That emptiness is withdrawal. You're detoxing from a story you've been telling for years. Stop building evidence for why your life is hard. Start cataloging evidence for why it's workable. Not perfect, workable. Acknowledge the small wins, the moments of ease, the times things go right. Train your mind to see the whole picture, not just the painful parts. You've been telling a story where you're fundamentally broken. What if you told a new story? One where you're struggling, yes, but also learning, growing, and capable. The story you tell becomes the life you live. You're walking around with a nuclear reactor inside you, this raw, untapped power that you tell yourself you're saving for the perfect moment. But you know what happens to nuclear reactors that never get used? They don't stay powerful. They leak, they corrode. They become the most expensive, dangerous paperweights in history. You aren't protecting your potential. You're holding it hostage. The Stoics believed in sympatheia, the idea that everything is interconnected. But you've twisted this into a weapon against yourself. You tell yourself, if I'm connected to everything, then my failure will infect everything, so I'll just not play. You've turned cosmic unity into cosmic paralysis. Epictetus, the man who was born a slave and died a free teacher, told his students, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you must do. 2 steps. That's it. But you've been stuck on step 1 for years because you've made your dreams deliberately blurry. I want to be successful. Successful at what? By when? You keep it vague because clarity means accountability. It means you might have to show up and discover you're average, or worse, discover you're excellent, but then you'd have to sustain it. You aren't afraid of being bad at things. You're afraid of being good at things that don't matter. You're afraid of climbing the mountain and realizing the view isn't what you hoped. So you camp at the bottom telling yourself you're preparing for the ascent. You're not preparing, you're hiding. You know why you're lonely? Because people see you walking around with all that ammunition, refusing to fire. They see you treating your life like a museum piece instead of a weapon, and you can't connect with someone behind glass. People need someone real, someone in the arena getting their hands dirty. Here's your mission, and it's going to sting. Go do something you're terrible at, and do it in public. Post the failure. Let the world see you stumble. Let them see you at 30%, learning, falling, getting back up. That's where life lives. That feeling in your stomach right now, that's not fear. That's your unused potential, furious at you for keeping it theoretical. What would you do right now if you stopped saving yourself for later? You'd start that project, send that message, make that call, and it would probably go sideways, but you'd be alive. You'd be burning fuel instead of hoarding it. Stop conjugating your life in future tense. I will be. I could be. I should be. Start living in present tense. I am. I do. I fail. I learn. The gap between those 2 languages isn't a learning curve. It's just cowardice wearing a graduation cap. Type this below if you're ready. I am ready to be real, not perfect. Here is a hard truth. That permission you're waiting for, it's never coming, not because people are against you, but because the permission slip you're seeking doesn't exist outside your own decision to act. The Stoics called it prohairesis, the power of choice. It's the one thing truly yours, but you've outsourced it. You're waiting for your father's approval, for your partner's green light, for the universe to send a sign, for the stars to align, for someone, anyone, to look at you and say, okay, now you can start. But think about who you're waiting for. Your father is wrestling with his own ghosts. Your partner is managing their own fears. The universe is indifferent. No one is sitting in a control room wondering if today is the day they finally grant you permission to live. They're all too busy seeking permission for their own lives. What are you actually waiting for? When you say, "I'll do it when I'm ready," what does ready look like? When you say, "I'll start when the time is right," what makes a time right? You can't answer because you've kept it vague on purpose. If you defined it, you'd see it's either never coming or it's already here and you've been ignoring it. The depression you feel has a name: learned helplessness. It's what happens when you've practiced powerlessness for so long. It's become your default. You've forgotten you have agency. Even when doors swing open, you stand outside, waiting for someone to formally invite you in. Here's the secret: everyone is faking it. Everyone feels unauthorized. Everyone is making it up as they go. The people you admire, they started before they felt ready. They acted without permission. They decided their own yes was enough. The artist posted their work when it was raw. The entrepreneur launched while everyone called it crazy. The difference between them and you is that they moved while they were still scared. What would you do today if you gave yourself permission? Not recklessly, but genuinely. If you decided your own authorization was sufficient, what would change? You'd send that message, start that project, end that toxic situation, make that investment in yourself. It probably won't go perfectly. You'll feel like an imposter. Good. That's growth. That's courage. Give yourself permission to be who you are, to want what you want. No one else is coming. The permission you're waiting for is the permission you've been withholding from yourself. Start today, not perfectly, just start. Claim your fresh start. Type this: "I give myself permission to begin." You are grieving something no one else can see. There is no funeral for the person you didn't become. No memorial for the dreams you buried to be practical. No condolences for the life you imagined that quietly died. But the grief is real and it's drowning you. The Stoics spoke of apatheia, freedom from destructive passions, but they never said grief wasn't valid. They understood some losses must be felt. Your grief just looks like depression because no one taught you to name it. It feels like emptiness because you're mourning something that never existed. The unlived paths, the versions of yourself that fear or circumstance killed before they could breathe. You aren't sad about what happened. You're sad about what didn't. Think about who you were at 17, not the awkwardness, the dreams, the certainty that your life would matter. What happened to that person? They died slowly. 1,000 small surrenders. Every time you chose safety over authenticity. Every time you lowered your expectations to match your reality. Death by 1,000 practical choices. And no one mourned because you kept showing up, kept being responsible. On the outside, you were maturing. On the inside, you were watching yourself become a stranger. The gap between those two realities is where your grief lives. Your loneliness is partly this: you're surrounded by people who know who you became, but who never met who you were. The version with the big dreams. That person is gone and no one even knows to miss them. Here's what you need to hear. It's okay to grieve them. It's okay to mourn the life you imagined. It's okay to be sad about choices you can't undo. That grief is real. That loss matters. Write a eulogy for the person you didn't become. Not to wallow, but to honor them, to say goodbye. I grieve the version of me who believed anything was possible. That person died, and I never said goodbye. Feel that release? That's what happens when you name your grief. It stops haunting you. It becomes something you felt, not something you're avoiding. The difference between healthy grief and stuck grief is movement. Healthy grief asks, "What now?" Stuck grief just loops. You've been stuck. What now? Now you decide. Will the person you didn't become be a grave you visit forever or a foundation you build on? Grieve fully, then live fully. You owe them that much. Your mind hasn't been quiet in years. There's always something playing. Worry, judgment, planning, fantasy, analysis. You think you're thinking, but you're just producing noise, and it's exhausting you. Listen to your mind right now. Actually, listen. There's a voice commenting on this. Maybe it's skeptical. Maybe it's planning what to make for dinner. That voice never stops. You've mistaken this constant narration for consciousness itself. But consciousness isn't the noise. It's the silence between the noises that hears it. You, the real you, aren't the voice. You're the awareness that notices the voice. Your brain produces thoughts the way your heart produces beats, automatically. But somewhere, you started believing every single one. Your mind says you're worthless and you accept it as fact. Your mind replays an old embarrassment and you think it's teaching you something. It's not, it's just noise. How much of your depression is actual circumstance, and how much is just your mind's dramatic narration of your circumstance? Right now, in this exact moment before your mind adds its commentary, are you okay? Not your situation, not your past. You, here, breathing. Strip away the story. What's actually wrong? Probably nothing. You're just here, and your mind is screaming that here isn't enough. That's the noise, not the truth. Your loneliness is amplified by this noise. You can't be present with people because your mind is running a commentary. Are they judging me? Did I say that wrong? You're not in the conversation. You're in your head about the conversation. People feel your absence. Here's your practice. Just once today, catch the narrator. When your mind says, your life is meaningless, just notice, oh, that's thinking, that's noise. Don't argue, just observe. The more you catch it, the more you realize you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts occur, and space can't be hurt. It's vast and unchanged by whatever passes through. What if you didn't auto-accept every thought? What if you treated your thoughts like strangers on the internet, with healthy skepticism? That's an interesting opinion, mind, but I'm not sure it's accurate. The depression lifts when you stop believing your depressed thoughts, not because they stop, but because you stop giving them authority. The real you, the awareness beneath the noise, is still there, untouched. Find it in the gap, in the silence. That's home. You wake up, and within 3 seconds, you've already made a choice. Not consciously, but you've chosen to be who you were yesterday, to feel what you felt yesterday, to live the patterns that created the life you're trying to escape. You aren't stuck. You're just choosing the same thing every day and calling it fate. You choose to grab your phone before you check in with yourself. You choose to replay old hurts instead of practicing new thoughts. You choose to scroll instead of create. Every single small choice is building your life. Not the big, dramatic ones. The tiny ones you don't even notice. You choose your focus, and your focus shapes your reality. You choose to focus on what's missing, and you create a life of lack. Choose differently. Tomorrow morning, before your feet hit the floor, ask yourself, who do I want to be today? Not who you should be, who you want to be. Then make one choice that honors that person. Maybe that person doesn't look at their phone for the first 30 minutes. Maybe that person speaks to themselves with kindness. One choice. Your depression is partly a choice. The choice to keep thinking the thoughts that create it. The choice to keep behaving in ways that deepen it. You're choosing it unconsciously. What if you chose differently? Consciously? Your loneliness is a choice too. The choice to stay behind your walls. The choice to wait for others to come to you. What if tomorrow you chose connection? Just one text, one genuine, "How are you?" to someone real. You're waiting to feel like changing, but feeling follows action. You won't feel motivated until you act motivated. Choose the behavior. The feeling catches up. Tonight, take inventory. Count how many times you chose unconsciously today versus consciously. Don't judge, just notice, because you can't choose differently until you notice you're choosing at all. You've been on autopilot. Tomorrow morning, use the manual option. 3 seconds of consciousness, that's all it takes. One conscious choice, then another, until choosing becomes your new pattern. The life you want isn't in the future, it's in your next choice. Write this promise: tomorrow I choose consciously. We've covered a lot. The domestication, the addiction to pain, the hostage of potential, the phantom permission, the unspoken grief, the mental static, and the unconscious choice. It all points to one thing: you've been living your life at a distance, performing it, analyzing it, preparing for it, but not actually living it. You don't have to waste another 25 years. You can choose differently, starting tomorrow morning, starting in your next breath. Here's your final practice. Before you sleep tonight, set one specific intention for tomorrow morning. Write it down. Tomorrow, I will spend the first 5 minutes awake without my phone. Tomorrow, I will speak kindly to myself. Something concrete. Then tomorrow night, you'll know, you'll have evidence, and evidence builds belief, and belief builds momentum, and momentum builds a life. If this message landed somewhere real, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below, one sentence about what shifted in you. Subscribe to Stoic Mindset Mastery, because we're not here for motivation. We're here for transformation. Your life is waiting, not in some distant future, right here, in tomorrow morning, when you open your eyes and get those 3 seconds before the old story takes over. What will you choose? The arena is waiting. Stop spectating. Fight. Drop this in the comments: I choose to live, not just exist.